Hi, my name is Barry Darnell and I'm the Director of Career Analysts, who are the Australian and New Zealand distributors of Morrisby products. In this presentation I'm going to step you through the various assessments and multiple choice questionnaires involved in the Morrisby profile, and also talk a little bit about the underlying theory. I want to start off by pointing out this is a comprehensive assessment. 1 hour 40 minutes of hard work in total, 1 hour 25 of which involves completing timed assessments. It comes from a solid research base called differential ability, and I'll talk more about that later. The history of the business, well, Morrisby organisation has a 50+ year track record of blending information on individuals to generate well thought through career suggestions, as well as suggestions on post-school study, and they also do suggest senior secondary subjects. The system comes with a lifetime web-based access as long as students log in at least every 5 years to keep that access open. So the kind of information we collect, well, it's 3 main areas: looking at abilities or aptitudes, their career interests and their personality. And it's this information that Morrisby then blend to generate the career suggestions. When students register, they're faced with a start button. They click on this, do some practice questions. The idea behind those is that they understand more about what the task involves. There's then a countdown timer on screen, counts down to 0. When it hits 0, they're locked out and moved on to the next assessment. Kind of things we're measuring. Well, there were 2 verbal reasoning exercises. This is the first one, 5 different words all saying big. And in the second one it's a sequence here of increasingly large road-going vehicles. Now, verbal reasoning is the ability to see the links between concepts presented in words. And it's quite unlike performance in a school English exam, because there's no grammar here. There's no creative writing, poetry, Shakespeare, etc. If English is not your first language, then the vocabulary may well have been a barrier for you in these assessments, in which case within Morrisby there is an additional vocabulary test which will assess your vocabulary and adjust the reasoning score to take that into account. Speak to your careers advisor if that might affect you. Moving on, we have 2 numerical reasoning assessments. Here a number series, and here a grid with a question mark in the corner. Now you can get 100% on numerical reasoning just with addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, and knowledge of no other mathematical principles. So don't think about this as mathematics, think about it as quantitative thinking, and I'll talk later about that. With numerical reasoning, it's fair to say that not everyone who does well in this area will be good at maths, but most people who are good at maths will do well in this area. We then have 2 abstract reasoning assessments. In this one, it's diagrammatic reasoning, and we're focused on the actual pictures and shapes themselves. And in this one, it's less looking at the pictures and more of a sequencing and patterning behind. Now, I'm often asked, why do we measure this kind of information for careers guidance purposes? And the answer is that abstract reasoning is one of the key building blocks of human ability. And where does it fit in education and in careers? Well, instead of thinking about this as abstract reasoning, think about this as understanding information presented in pictures and diagrams. When you say that, most people will jump immediately to visual design and say a lot of pictures in that. You'd be right. But it also features heavily in science and some areas of maths. I'll build a picture with the sciences starting with biology. If you open a biology book, you see words and pictures. The only reason they use pictures is that's the best way to present that kind of information. So if someone can show through some structured testing that they have a natural ability to work with that data, that can only be helpful. So success in biology would be related to understanding the verbal concepts, and the abstract reasoning, the diagrammatic reasoning. Chemistry, not so much the verbal information, but more the numerical and the abstract. Physics, again, not so much the verbal, more the numerical, the abstract, and the mechanical principles, certainly at school level. So that's why we're measuring this kind of information. Moving on, we have mechanical reasoning and we have spatial reasoning. And spatial reasoning is the capacity to mentally rotate images. Here we have three images which are the same, but one of them has been flipped so you can see its other side, and the task is to work out which one's been flipped. And in the practice questions we show the students how to do that. Now, how do these tests fit together to relate to differential ability? I'm going to describe the concept using an analogy of sport. I'm going to take three aspects of someone's physical body to predict the kind of sport they might do. So let's start off with somebody who's got long legs. You can all think of sports where having long legs may be an advantage. If we give you more information and say they're also light in weight, you're getting a better mental picture and narrowing down the kind of sports they're likely to be suited to. And my third component here is explosive power, the capacity of muscles to dump energy quickly and give you that boing to, in this case, launch off the ground for high jump. And you could think of many other sports or positions in teams which would also suit. Second example, here's somebody with long legs and low weight, but this time they don't seem to have the explosive power. Instead, their muscle structure is better suited to endurance events. For this person, perhaps distance running might suit them better. And the final example, very different. Short legs, lots of weight, lots of explosive power. People often say things like shot put, weightlifting. My preference is sumo wrestling, but they all would work. So this essentially is differential ability. And a key thing I'd like you to think about here is that what makes the high jumper, for example, a good high jumper is partly having low weight. If they had more weight, I'd argue they'd be a better athlete in general across a broad basket of sports, but the low weight makes them suited to that task. And this is the whole thing around differential ability in careers. It's not saying what can you do, it's saying what are you suited to. Okay, now let's have a look at this in terms of the actual verbal numerical abstract. Here's an example of someone with a verbal strength. This person is likely to both understand and explain the world best using words. So wordsmiths tend to move towards certain career areas. Those with a strong abstract tend to be the visual learners. We've heard before that it's going to be things like science in various areas and design. So science, technology, engineering. Strong numerical. We heard before that this is not necessarily maths, but it is a quantitative thinking, and quantitative thinkers tend to migrate towards careers in the general areas of finance, accounting, could be risk management, logistics, insurance, a wide range of areas. But this is a complex profile because only a proportion of people with this profile shape are interested in those career areas. With the others, think more carefully about organising. So people with this profile shape tend to be quite good at putting in place systems, processes, methods, and being efficient in how they operate. Fourth shape, defined by a lower numerical. This is the services to people profile, as well as areas of art. So service to people would cover everything from medical and nursing, careers guidance, psychology, social work, these kind of areas. And finally, there's the balanced profile. Now, 22% of Australians have a balanced profile. And that doesn't mean that Morrisby has failed to generate a direction for them. Hopefully what it's doing is reflecting who they are. No particular strengths, no particular weaknesses. They're balanced, they're all-rounders. We do know that in this situation, the career suggestions Morrisby generates are going to be focused more on their interests than their personality than their aptitudes. But there are some careers which we know people with balanced profiles are overweight in. And these are around the media, advertising, training. At high levels, we're talking general management, we're talking management consultancy, and we're talking really any jobs where there's a bit of everything involved in it. So that's the model. Moving on, there were 2 multiple choice questionnaires, the first one looking at career interests. A bit over half the questions started off with "I'd like a job where I," and some at the end had "I could and would like to." And these ones are getting at people's talents around sport and music and art, which aptitude testing just is not good at relating to. Finally, there was a personality questionnaire. Half the questions started with "Others would say that I am." The last half, "I would prefer to." And these can be answered on a 5-point scale where you can be in the middle. So that's the end of this presentation. If you'd like to go through the practice questions yourself, here's the link, and there is a second video in this series looking at the online presentation of a sample student's results. Thank you.